In February of 2019, Spanish police officers were asked to perform a wellness check at the Madrid home of 69-year-old Maria Soledad Gomez after loved ones hadn't heard from her in days. Police were met at the door by the woman's son, 26-year-old Alberto Sanchez Gomez. Officers asked him if his mother was inside. He said that she was and let them in, at which point they came upon a hellish scene. It became rapidly clear that Maria had been murdered and dismembered by Alberto. Plastic-wrapped body parts were found in various rooms. Some had been placed in containers in the fridge while others were cooked in the oven or in a pan. A number of officers became sick to their stomachs due to the stench inside the residence and the sheer horror of what they witnessed. Alberto admitted to fatally strangling his mother during an argument and then cutting up her body using a saw and kitchen knives. He disposed of some remains and during the 15 days that followed the murder, also ate pieces of his mother's body. Some he consumed raw while others he cooked or fed to his dog. Leading up to her murder, Maria was frequently attacked by her son, whose father had died when he was in his mid-teens. Maria had reported Alberto to the authorities at least a dozen times, and he'd been admitted to psychiatric care 3 times at her behest. Following an arrest in 2018, he was given a restraining order but violated it by returning to Maria's home, even though she was terrified of him. The woman took Alberto in whenever he called, reportedly telling friends, "What can I do? He is my son." In the summer of 2021, Alberto was given a sentence of 15 years for the murder and a further 5 months for desecration of a corpse. Number 8. Marc-Anthony Cantrell. In late March of 2023, Jared Andrea, aged 22, was reported missing from a mental health home in Columbia, South Carolina. He struggled with issues related to his autism spectrum disorder and was enrolled in an outpatient program. He had been dropped off at the New Hope Home Solutions LLC-run facility by family members. When they arrived to pick him up, they were informed that he was gone. In spite of an extensive police search, the young man couldn't be located. About 4 months later, on July the 4th, Deshea Butler disappeared from the same facility. His mutilated body was found in a nearby wooded area. 2 days later, investigators examined surveillance footage that showed 35-year-old Butler's body being dragged by his roommate, Marc-Anthony Cantrell. The latter was a felon who, in 2018, had been convicted of setting fire to his grandmother's home in Jackson to cover up for the fact that he'd killed her 3 dogs. According to law enforcement reports on the arson incident, Cantrell claimed that he blacked out after injecting amphetamine. Upon regaining his senses, he said that there was an axe in his hand and he saw that he had killed 3 dogs. The then 18-year-old reportedly made statements to the police that butchering the pets felt good and made things feel right. It wasn't the first time he'd killed his family's animals, hence the efforts to cover it up. Cantrell was convicted of 3 counts of mistreatment of animals and 1 count of arson 2nd degree. He was given a suspended sentence before ending up at the New Hope home. In August of 2023, he was arrested for Butler's murder, whereupon he confessed to killing Andrea as well. Cantrell, an alleged Satan worshipper with devil horns tattooed above his eyebrows, stated that he murdered the men, cut off their ears and ate them to gain their power. Claimed to have been acting at the direction of an alter ego named Robert Baldwin. Cantrell strangled Butler with a belt-like ligature and struck him in the head with a gym weight. In the days that followed the killing, Cantrell routinely drank the man's blood from a coffee cup. Butler's autopsy backed the reports of cannibalism, as his ears had been mutilated. Cantrell told the police that months prior he placed a bag over Andrea's head and strangled him with a rope. He then put his body in a blue Rubbermaid bin, carried it outside and disposed of it in a public garbage can. The remains were presumably picked up and discarded at a landfill, never to be seen again. As of the latest updates on the matter, Cantrell was back behind bars to serve his sentence for arson. He was charged with the double murder of Andrea and Butler, but no trial date was announced. Andrea's grandmother, Peggy, filed a lawsuit against New Hope Home Solutions LLC, its owner, Brittany Reynolds Jackson, as well as the South Carolina Department of Mental Health. The woman accused them of gross negligence, recklessness, and wrongful death for allowing Cantrell, a budding serial killer, to be placed with vulnerable patients. Number 7. DeAndre Booker. 30-year-old Ashley Elkins messaged loved ones on January the 2nd of 2025 to say that she was running errands and heading to her home in Warren, Michigan from a beauty supply store. The texts would mark the last time that anyone heard anything from her. Elkins' abandoned vehicle was found in the area of 13 Mile and Little Mac in Roseville on January the 8th. The mother of two's phone last pinged near the Roseville apartment of her ex-boyfriend, DeAndre Booker. After searching the man's residence and reviewing surveillance footage from the area, the police concluded that Elkins was the victim of a crime of violence at Booker's home. Blood was found in the bathroom and Booker was determined to have lied to the police, although the specifics of his false statements weren't disclosed. He was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and mutilating a dead body. Booker and Elkins had broken up in the fall of 2024 after the latter found messages from other women on his phone. Elkins was a beautician, and she had recently turned her Warren home into a salon. On the morning of December the 31st of 2024, Booker had reportedly scheduled an appointment under a fake name in an effort to gain Elkins' attention. As she refused to talk to him, the woman's 22-year-old sister, Alexis, said that they didn't open the door and sat quietly behind the blinds of the home when he arrived at the address. Through his lawyer, Booker claimed that the family was lying and that the home visit never happened. As of the latest information available on the case, he pleaded not guilty to his charges and a trial date was pending. Number 6. Marcin Majerkiewicz. Law enforcement in Manchester, England, were alerted to a gruesome discovery at a Salford Nature Reserve in early April of 2024. A member of the public came upon a discarded torso and thighs which were wrapped in cling film. The authorities faced a challenging investigation as they were initially unable to identify the victim or perpetrator. However, after combing through CCTV footage, investigators saw that a long-haired, heavy-set man had taken a blue bag for life to the Kersaldale Nature Reserve and then returned without it. On April the 2nd, the bag seemed heavy and the suspect had to rest and swap hands as he headed to the wooded area. The police knew what the man looked like but didn't have a name. On April the 25th, 3 weeks after the body parts were discovered, 2 plainclothes Greater Manchester police officers were working the case when they spotted him, by chance, on the street. The officers followed the man as he got on a bus, then blocked the vehicle's path and boarded it. As seen on body cam footage, they approached the suspect and told him he was being detained for the purpose of a search and identification. He was identified as 42-year-old Polish native Marcin Majerkiewicz, who insisted that his arrest was definitely a mistake 100%. However, the evidence that was uncovered in the aftermath of his arrest left little doubt that he was a killer. The victim was the man's housemate, 67-year-old Stuart Everett, who had not been seen for weeks. The latter was a fellow Polish national who was christened Roman Zymacki but anglicized his name. When Majerkiewicz was arrested, he had 2 phones and bank cards in Everett's name. An examination of the home that they shared produced blood splatter as well as saw marks and evidence that a cleanup had occurred. Majerkiewicz had murdered and extensively dismembered Everett. He flayed the man's face off and dumped it separately from his skull, which he shattered into multiple pieces. Majerkiewicz's subsequent movements were pieced together through CCTV, and the police determined that he dumped the remains at 4 different locations. Only a third of the body parts were recovered, however, with the rest likely lost to nature. A pathologist pieced together Everett's skull and concluded he'd been repeatedly struck in the head with a heavy, blunt implement. After killing him, Majerkiewicz stole the man's identity, plundered his bank accounts, and sent messages to his relatives to maintain the illusion that he was still alive. On April the 3rd, he researched the addresses of Everett's brother and sent him a birthday card, purportedly from the dead man. Majerkiewicz denied killing and disembodying the victim but gave no evidence in his defense during the trial that followed. A jury only took 1 hour and 36 minutes to convict him in March of 2025. A concrete motive for the murder wasn't established, but the authorities believed that it was mainly financial and at least in part connected to Majerkiewicz's fascination with gore and horror movies. He was jailed for life with a minimum of 34 years behind bars. Number 5. Mohammed Abbkr. In April of 2024, Mohammed Abbkr was given an indefinite detainment order at a high-security hospital following 2 separate attacks in which he deliberately set elderly men on fire. On February the 27th of 2023, Abbkr was recorded on CCTV leaving the West London Islamic Center in Ealing after a prayer service. He followed 82-year-old Hashi Addo and approached him on the street. In spite of the men never meeting, Abbkr was reportedly angry that Addo didn't recognize him. Abbkr said to the elderly man in Arabic, "I swear in the name of Allah, in the name of God, you will know me." He pulled out a bottle containing flammable liquid, doused the man and set him ablaze. CCTV captured Addo erupting in flames. He later recounted that he'd managed to avoid serious damage to his face by putting his hand up. Addo said, "I remember removing my jacket to get the flames off. My vest was on fire and I took it off. That is when I realized God has saved me." He survived his ordeal with burns to his hands and ears. Abbkr fled and less than a month later carried out a nearly identical attack roughly 120 miles away in Birmingham. The victim was 70-year-old Mohammed Rayaz. On the eve of Ramadan, March the 20th of 2023, CCTV footage showed Abbkr following Rayaz after the latter had left a mosque on Dudley Road. The elderly man was confronted on the street by Abbkr, who asked if he spoke Arabic. Shortly after, Rayaz responded that he spoke Urdu and Punjabi. Abbkr sprayed him with fuel and put a lighter to his neck. Rayaz was engulfed by flames from head to foot, and Abbkr added more petrol to the fire. "I did not know what to do. I just tried to pull off my clothing. I was screaming for help, but nobody came. Reyes remembered. He was able to stumble to his son's nearby home. Reyes survived, but his burns were more serious than Addo's. An image uploaded by his family 24 hours after the attack showed the extensive damage that the fire had caused to his face. His eyes and lips were severely swollen, while his white beard, which he'd kept for decades following a religious pilgrimage, was completely burnt off. At the time that the photo was taken, Reyes was unable to speak, hear, or open his eyes. When he regained some of his strength, he reportedly asked his son, "Why did he attack me? I didn't do anything to him." He received skin grafts and spent weeks recovering. The victim faced the possibility of permanent scarring in addition to struggling with PTSD and depression. Reyes' son said of Abbkr, "I would describe the attacker as a coward. This coward does not belong to any religion, society, or even humanity." When Abbkr was arrested, his backpack was found to contain lighter fluid in a plastic water bottle, a lighter with a cannabis leaf design and 2 blades. The 29-year-old had arrived in the UK from Sudan as an asylum seeker in 2017, and 2 years later was granted an indefinite leave to remain. He was determined to have been suffering from paranoid schizophrenia, and he believed that people possessed by evil spirits were controlling him through magic. His mental health issues were a significant factor in the attacks. After he was convicted on 2 counts of attempted murder at Birmingham Crown Court, he was ordered to be held in psychiatric care without a release date. Number 4. Austin Harrouff. In August of 2016, Austin Harrouff, a muscular exercise science major at Florida State University, stormed out of a family dinner while in an agitated state. He entered a Tequesta home and carried out a gruesome attack on couple John Stevens and Michelle Mishkon, aged 59 and 53, respectively. Harrouff had never met them before but proceeded to stab them both and also non-fatally attacked their neighbor, Jeffrey Fisher, when he tried to help. Deputies arrived at the scene to find Mishkon's mangled body in the garage. Harrouff had mounted Stevens and he was chewing on his face in the driveway. Deputies were hesitant to open fire, fearing that they might hit the victim. It took the combined effort of multiple officers, a taser, and a police dog to subdue the raging 19-year-old. He told law enforcement, "Help me, I ate something bad," as he spit out a piece of flesh. Harrouff admitted he'd eaten humans. After he was pulled off Stevens, he begged deputies to shoot him, saying that he deserved to die. When he was restrained and taken to a hospital, Harrouff still had human tissue between his teeth. In a 2019 report, forensic psychiatrist Dr. Philip Resnick wrote that Harrouff had bipolar disorder and was manic with psychotic features. Resnick said that the team believed he was half dog, half man at the time of the attack. 2 months after the harrowing incident, Harrouff told the Dr. Phil TV show that he was fleeing a demon he called Daniel when he ran into the couple's home. The psychiatric assessments conducted on Harrouff highlighted other instances of delusion in the days leading up to the incident. He at one point thought he was a centaur, a half-man, half-horse mythological creature after becoming fixated on his Sagittarius star sign. He also felt that he had superpowers within him and that he was Jesus. 2 mental health experts, one from the state and the other provided by Harrouff's defense, concluded that he was in the grips of acute psychosis at the time of the attack and unable to tell the difference between right and wrong. Days earlier, he'd bought psychedelic mushrooms. While no traces of the drug were found in his system on the night in question, reports indicated that Harrouff was a habitual drug and alcohol user. It was unclear if his substance abuse had led to his psychotic break, and the legal proceedings primarily focused on the mental health-related findings. Prosecutors and Harrouff's lawyers ultimately agreed that Circuit Judge Sherwood Bauer would make the determination if Harrouff was legally insane when he committed the double murder. In 2022, Bauer concluded that Harrouff would have been unable to form intent and that he met Florida's criteria to be acquitted by reason of insanity. Harrouff was ordered to be placed in a secured mental health facility indefinitely. The decision drew outrage from the murdered couple's families. Stevens' daughter, Ivy, told Harrouff, "You are not the victim. You're a murderer, a monster, and a coward for not taking responsibility for what you did." Number 3. Karl Addo. On July the 17th of 2012, Karl Addo viciously attacked his roommate, 23-year-old Sergio Retamar Marquez, at the home they shared in Bournemouth, England. Addo was a paranoid schizophrenic who'd absconded from the Huntley Mental Health Centre in central London in October of 2011. Addo was a voluntary patient at the facility, and he disappeared the day before a mental health tribunal determined he would be sectioned. He moved to Bournemouth in May of 2012. He shared an apartment with Marquez, a Spanish national who worked as a hotel waiter. On July the 17th, their other roommates fled out of the home screaming upon discovering Marquez's extensively mutilated body. The young man had been decapitated and disemboweled. Earlier that day, their landlord had told Addo to leave the property after he had not paid his rent. The incident was reported to have caused him to snap. fueling the complex delusions that it formed regarding Marquez. Addo believed him to be part of a gang with special powers that were injecting him with drugs as part of a plan to torture and ultimately kill him. On that day, a neighbor heard the words, "Please, Karl, please," followed by the sounds of furniture being moved, maniacal laughter, and then silence. Addo cornered Marquez and struck him with a cleaver. In a prolonged, horrific, and very violent attack, he then severed his head and eviscerated him to prevent him from recovering from his injuries. Addo fled the home but was arrested nearby, whereupon officers found him drenched in blood. During the legal proceedings that followed, a number of doctors confirmed that he was profoundly mentally ill. By December of 2013, Addo had admitted manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. He was sentenced to a minimum term of 6.5 years behind bars and was also ordered to be held under the Mental Health Act. He would not be released until the relevant authorities conclude that it is safe to do so. The sentencing judge told Addo, "Given all that I have heard, you must recognize that there is a real possibility that such a conclusion will never be reached." Number 2. Yegor Komarov. In the fall of 2021, a Mitsubishi crashed into a road safety barrier in Sortavala, a town in northern Russia. Following the collision, a headless body rolled out of the vehicle's trunk and 3 men fled into the woods. They were arrested and identified as Yan Shepanovsky, Ivan Markov, and Yegor Komarov. The latter would prove to be one of the most dangerous and deranged killers to have been apprehended in Russia in recent years. The victim found in the trunk was identified as 50-year-old auto repair shop owner Arkady Kazanyan. On November the 20th, he'd gotten into a fight with the face-tattooed Shepanovsky, who consequently asked his friend Komarov to kill him. Komarov stabbed Kazanyan multiple times when he was alone and then set fire to his auto shop. He and Shepanovsky stole a car with the intention of burying Kazanyan's body in the forest. Markov was behind the wheel, but he drove drunk and crashed on the Sortavala highway, resulting in the crime's discovery and the trio's capture. While in custody, Komarov chillingly told the police, "In general, I like killing people." The man who threw up a double peace sign in his mugshot readily confessed to Kazanyan's murder. He also admitted to killing a 38-year-old man on September the 26th of 2020. Komarov stalked the victim, only identified as a stockbroker named Filipov, and knifed him to death in Sosnovka Forest Park in St. Petersburg. Komarov claimed that he killed the man because he wanted to taste human flesh. When he died, "I gutted his neck and tasted the blood and meat, but the meat was difficult to cut as the knife was blunt and I did not like the taste of his veins." Komarov told the police he said that he severed Filipov's tongue before disposing of his body in a nearby drainage pipe, where it was discovered the following day. Komarov took the tongue home with him and cooked it with butter. "I tried it, but I didn't like it, but I probably would have liked another part of the body," Komarov recounted. He was reportedly able to evade capture by hiding in an attic for an extended period of time. Following his arrest for Kazanyan's murder, the cannibal told officers to tighten his handcuffs so that he wouldn't bite them. In a recorded interview, an investigator asked the 23-year-old, "Are you ready to eat a man again?" At which point, Komarov mockingly replied, "Do you have one?" When questioned further, he said that he'd gotten the urge to consume human flesh spontaneously, adding that he didn't feel remorse. In June of 2023, the St. Petersburg District Court sentenced Komarov to 19 years in prison and Shepanovsky to 13 years. According to a subsequent report, Komarov appealed that sentence. In November, while he was in pre-trial detention in Vyborg, Komarov was reported to have killed his cellmate. He'd gotten hold of a razor and used it to slit the unnamed 42-year-old's throat open. The details of the most recent murder and the punishment that Komarov faced for it remained unclear. Stick around after number 1 if you'd also like to watch our release from a while back about when being dumb as a doorknob goes wrong. That's coming up right after this. Number 1. Mina Ditch, Safaa Boular, Rizlaine Boular, and Khawla Barghouthi. In the summer of 2018, Safaa Boular became the youngest woman to ever be convicted of plotting a terrorist attack in Britain. The 18-year-old was jailed for life at the Old Bailey with a minimum term of 13 years behind bars, along with her mother and sister, namely Mina Ditch and Rizlaine Boular. She was also part of the UK's first all-female terror cell. The sisters' radicalization was deemed to have been partially born out of the influence of their mother, whose views of the Islamic faith had become progressively more extreme since 2012. 2 years later, Rizlaine was flown back to the UK from Istanbul after she attempted and failed to reach Syria in order to join ISIS. When she was in her mid-teens in 2016, Safaa was seduced online by Naweed Hussein, an ISIS fighter originally from Coventry. They talked up to 12 hours each day and declared their love for each other. During the exchanges, Hussein assured the team that life as an ISIS fighter was good, which were routine promises that he made to other vulnerable girls online as part of the terror group's recruitment tactics. He at one point sent Safaa a photo of a publicly executed prisoner and of him wearing a bomb belt, telling the teen, "Belts are a must even with you. Don't even be hesitant to pull the pin. The twisted romance culminated with a marriage ceremony on a messaging app. Safaa planned to meet 32-year-old Hussein in Syria and join him in his terrorist activities. By then, however, she and her family had already come under the attention of the authorities. Safaa was prevented from traveling to the war zone and the security services confiscated her phone and passport. She was questioned and admitted talking to Hussein but didn't mention the marriage. The MI5 deployed a team of undercover officers posing online as British extremists. Since Safaa was no longer able to reach Syria, she and Hussein discussed her carrying out a grenade and gun attack in the UK, with the British Museum as one of the potential targets. The undercover MI5 agents expressed willingness to help and fully infiltrated the plot. The home where Safaa lived with Mina in Vauxhall was fitted by the authorities with electronic monitoring devices. Safaa's resolve to commit an attack on British soil was strengthened following the death of Hussein in early April of 2017. He was killed in what was reported but unconfirmed as a targeted US drone strike. Based on information provided by British intelligence, Safaa was given the news that Hussein had become a martyr by an undercover agent who later made contact again, asking for her to reveal what she and Hussein had been planning. Upon doing so, the team was arrested. While in custody, she encouraged Rizlaine to take her place. In a recorded jailhouse call, they spoke in code under the guise of organizing a friendly gathering, referring to the attack as a tea party and the weapons as cakes. When Rizlaine gave Safaa the date, the team replied, "Mate, you guys are partying without me." Rizlaine and Mina, clad in burqas, were caught on CCTV buying knives at a local supermarket. The women were recorded looking for targets around the Palace of Westminster, and they reportedly planned on stabbing a police officer. 21-year-old Rizlaine shared her plans with her friend, Khawla Barghouthi, and reportedly practiced executing the knife ambush at her home. On April the 27th, the day before the planned attack, the authorities moved to take the women into custody. Rizlaine was arrested alongside Barghouthi during an armed raid at a home in Willesden in northwest London. Rizlaine swore at the officers and refused to comply with their orders. She at one point abruptly moved her hand from behind a rail, and an officer, believing she was pulling a weapon, shot her 3 times in the abdomen. Rizlaine was dragged into the street to receive first aid while reportedly screaming at law enforcement, "Don't touch me, my body, don't touch my dress." She recovered from her gunshot wounds and faced the legal repercussions of the terrorist plot alongside her mother and younger sister Safaa, who normally wore a burqa, donned Western clothes throughout her trial, and claimed to have been de-radicalized. Her defense argued that her views had been the result of grooming and exploitation, but the jury and judge were unconvinced. Safaa was determined to have had a leading role in the plot, and she was found guilty of 2 counts of preparing terrorist acts. Judge Marc Dennis QC said, "In my view, there's insufficient evidence to say at this stage that this defendant is a truly transformed individual. Her views were deeply entrenched." Dennis added, however much she may have been influenced and drawn into extremism, it appeared she knew what she was doing and acted with open eyes. Rizlaine pleaded guilty to preparing acts of terrorism and was jailed for life with a minimum of 16 years. Mina admitted to helping her and was given a sentence of 6 years and 9 months. Barghouthi was jailed for 2 years and 4 months after she pleaded guilty to failing to alert the authorities. On the afternoon of July the 25th of 2013, Oregon man Derek Mosley equipped himself with a bat and knife before attempting to rob a gun store in Portland. Mosley entered the discount gun sale shop on Beaverton Hillside Highway and tried to mug them out of a gun. According to authorities, the store manager simply pulled out his own personal firearm and pointed it straight at the would-be robber. The manager ordered him to drop the baseball bat, the 9-inch long knife he had on him, and the gun he was trying to steal. Responding deputies arrived to find Mosley on the floor being held at gunpoint by the manager. They handcuffed the 22-year-old on the spot and took him into custody on charges of robbery, theft, unlawful possession of a firearm, and criminal mischief. On February the 28th of 2014, Mosley pleaded guilty to the charges and was sentenced to 5 years of probation, which included mental health treatment. He was also ordered to have no contact with the victim and to pay a total of $650 in fines and restitution. Number 8. Junior Francis. Police in Lambeth, London, said that an Englishman who denied having dealt drugs was ultimately undone by his vanity, taking selfies and boasting on social media. 33-year-old Junior Francis has been caught by police in November of 2014 after investigators found his Instagram post, which flaunted thick wads of cash and his extravagant lifestyle. When police raided his South London home on Campbell Close, nearly $11,000 in cash as well as $113,000 worth of crack cocaine and heroin were recovered. Francis was arrested and initially denied any involvement in drug dealing, but investigators found inculpatory evidence from his mobile phone. Several pictures were recovered showing him posing with wads of cash pressed like a telephone to the side of his face. Investigators also found evidence of the proceeds of drug dealing, corroborating the suspect's involvement with local drug dealers. On March the 25th of 2015, Francis was sentenced to 80 months behind bars after he pleaded guilty to possession of Class A drugs with intent to supply and money laundering. Number 7. Amari Hendricks. 24-year-old Amari Hendricks was accused of pulling out a loaded gun in a McDonald's drive-thru in Altamonte Springs, Florida, on February the 16th of 2023 because she reportedly believed she was owed a free cookie. Hendricks confronted a McDonald's employee at the drive-thru, asserting that she was entitled to a free cookie because the employee did not ask her about the franchise's rewards program. The manager of the restaurant came to the drive-thru window and gave Hendricks a cookie, but she became belligerent nevertheless. She grabbed a black handgun, inserted a magazine into the weapon, and proceeded to rack the slide before pointing it at the staff. Hendricks then proceeded to park her vehicle near the front door of the restaurant and immediately walked to the entrance. Meanwhile, the staff called law enforcement while another crew member attempted to lock the door. However, Hendricks forced her way through the front door, grabbed the employee by the arm, and began striking him and forcing him out of the building. The man suffered multiple scratches to his face and neck area. Hendricks then finally decided to leave, got in her vehicle, and drove away before an officer stopped her nearby. The officer gave her several loud commands to exit her vehicle, but she refused. She eventually came out, but was still not compliant, at which point the officer put her in handcuffs. Officers later found a loaded Taurus G3C handgun with a round in the chamber on the driver's side floorboard. They also obtained surveillance footage corroborating the employee's accounts of what happened, which ultimately landed Hendricks at the Seminole County Jail. The woman was facing charges of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, improper exhibit of a firearm, and battery causing bodily harm, as well as resisting arrest. You're not the same when you're hungry. Number 6. The Armed Robbers. A violent gang in England that targeted newsagents and stores in Kent and Sussex was caught by police after one of their members posed for a selfie sporting the same pair of pajamas he'd worn during a raid. The gang had carried out at least 7 armed robberies between November of 2011 and June 2012, while wearing balaclavas, brandishing knives, and in some instances, a handgun. They terrorized workers and stole an estimated $44,500 in cash from safes, as well as cigarettes, scratch cards, and stamps from a number of stores. Following a months-long investigation, a suspected member of the group, 24-year-old Terry Sullivan, was arrested. His involvement in the robberies was confirmed after investigators went through his mobile phone. A group chat in the device titled Armed Robbers showed the other suspects posing for a string of selfies. One of the photos showed a man posing with a handgun in a black balaclava and hooded top. Another showed Sullivan posing in his pajama bottoms, which were the same ones he'd worn during a raid that was caught on surveillance footage. Following Sullivan's arrest, the rest of the gang were taken into custody, namely 31-year-old Christopher Heath, 24-year-old Thomas Balderston, and Christopher Aldred, aged 23. The group were facing charges of possessing a firearm with the intention of committing an offense and conspiracy to rob. Heath and Sullivan later received a 6-year jail sentence after pleading guilty and giving evidence for the prosecution. Balderston and Aldred were found guilty following a trial and were sentenced to 13 years behind bars. Number 5. Felicia Trujillo and Phil Martinez. A Colorado woman worked out a plan with her boyfriend to get narcotics into jail through a courtroom exchange at her own sentencing hearing on January the 27th of 2010. Officials learned of the plot because the woman in jail, 22-year-old Felicia Trujillo, and her boyfriend, Phil Martinez, talked about it on a monitored phone line. The district judge handling Trujillo's case was informed about the couple's plot and consequently allowed the sheriff's deputies to install cameras in his courtroom. Shortly after a mock trial in the courtroom concluded, it was immediately vacated, at which point Martinez entered the courtroom and dropped a bag of narcotics in the jury box just before Trujillo's scheduled hearing. Detectives who were watching the man immediately placed him under arrest. Following the incident, Martinez was facing drug and contraband charges, among others. A month later, he pleaded guilty to 1 count of introduction of contraband in exchange for the dismissal of other charges. The 26-year-old was ultimately sentenced to 3 years of probation. Although Trujillo was facing similar charges, it never became clear what sentence she received, if any. Number 4. Andrew Hennels. After boasting about plans for an armed robbery on Facebook on February the 13th of 2015, Englishman Andrew Hennels robbed a Tesco in Kings Lynn and was subsequently arrested. The 31-year-old had made a series of posts to the social media platform hours prior to the robbery. The posts included a picture of a large knife and details of his plan, which stated he was doing Tesco over. 15 minutes after the aforementioned post, Norfolk police received reports of a man brandishing a knife and demanding cash from staff working at Tesco. Before police arrived, Hennels absconded via a stolen car. Shortly after, he was apprehended at a nearby pub. He was in possession of a knife and $620 in stolen cash. Hennels was charged with robbery, carrying a knife, and carjacking. The following month, he pleaded guilty to the first 2 charges. As a result, the carjacking charge was laid on file. On April the 10th of 2015, the man was handed a 4-year prison sentence. A sergeant from the Criminal Investigation Department of Kings Lynn said that the Facebook announcement made it easier to prove the case because it confirmed what investigators had already known. Number 3. Quavai Young. On March the 16th of 2023, a Florida woman was arrested at a McDonald's in Cocoa after she brandished a gun at an employee because of an argument over a meal that wasn't even on the menu. 26-year-old Quavai Young had driven into the McDonald's located at 927 Dixon Boulevard shortly before 11 p.m. and reportedly ordered a cheeseburger bundle. Through the drive-thru speaker system, an employee told her that what she wanted wasn't on the menu and suggested another option. However, the woman refused, instead pulling up to the first drive-thru window. Once there, she became belligerent and demanded that her order be taken. The employee asked why Young was so mad over a simple issue. In turn, Young pointed her gun at the worker and verbally threatened her before proceeding further to the last window. The staff immediately called 911 and reported the incident. Responding officers arrived at the scene to find Young behind the wheel of her vehicle with an M&P Shield 9mm gun in the passenger's seat. When questioned about the drive-thru incident, Young denied threatening anyone and said that she had a permit to carry the firearm. She was eventually placed under arrest after officers reviewed security footage confirming the McDonald's employee's claims. It was also determined that the suspect didn't have a valid driver's license. In the end, Young was charged with open carry of a weapon, driving with a suspended license, and aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. She was booked into jail but subsequently released on a $7,500 bond. Number 2. Jacqueline Souza. 33-year-old Colorado man Brandon Watkins was stabbed to death in the early hours of July the 21st of 2018 after arguing with his fiancée over suspected infidelity. His fiancée, Jacqueline Souza, had called 911 to their Colorado Springs home on Cabana Circle, requesting medical assistance. Responding law enforcement found Watkins unresponsive and bloody on the kitchen floor with a steak knife near his body. Asked about what happened to Watkins, Souza claimed she and her fiancé had argued after the man suggested he wanted to invite a certain guest to their wedding. According to Souza, the suggested invitee was a woman who Watkins had had an affair with once. Upon being told by Watkins that he wanted to invite this woman, Souza simply lost it. The 31-year-old said that she and Watkins fought at home, but her account of what had happened changed with each telling of the story. In one of her versions of events, she claimed that when she accused Watkins of cheating with multiple women, the man came toward her with the knife and grabbed her by the throat. She said she pushed him away, causing him to fall down on top of the knife. Evidence showed Souza had bruising on her neck, proving her claims that Watkins had strangled her However, investigators also learned that Souza's account was inconsistent with where Watkins's body was found. The woman was initially arrested on suspicion of second-degree murder. She posted her $50,000 bond and was released on July the 24th of 2018. 3 months later, the 4th Judicial District Attorney's Office decided not to pursue the murder charge against Souza. The autopsy results pointed to 3 possible scenarios that could have led to the type of wound Watkins had suffered. However, not one of the scenarios could be proven accurately by Senior Deputy District Attorney Andy Vaughan. Vaughan said he had no likelihood of winning a case against Souza's self-defense claim and thus couldn't file charges. Consequently, Watkins's family continued to seek justice, holding steadfast in their belief in the victim's innocence. They said that the DA's office whitewashed what they considered to be a murder, sending a message to the community that violent criminals wouldn't be charged due to the possibility of a self-defense instruction at trial, though the family asked the judge to appoint a special prosecutor to take another look at the case. It never became clear if Souza even ended up getting prosecuted. Number 1. Nicholas Coffey. Deputies in Volusia County, Florida, tracked down a suspected car thief after he couldn't resist bragging about his newly acquired Mercedes-Benz on social media. 23-year-old Nicholas Coffey and an accomplice used the stolen car to break into several other vehicles on Deltona residential streets during the early morning hours of September the 2nd of 2023. They subsequently stopped at a gas station store where Coffey made a purchase. His face was covered and he was wearing blue latex gloves, but surveillance footage did show his distinctive tattoos, which eventually helped detectives identify him. At the time, authorities were also working on another case involving Coffey and had a warrant out for his arrest already. A search of the suspect's social media revealed photos of him wearing the same clothing as seen in the gas station footage. Coffey also posted about the stolen car, calling it his new ride. Detectives caught up with him the following morning and arrested him on multiple charges, including car theft, burglary, fraudulent use of a credit card, and probation violation. Thanks for watching. Would you rather have a split personality or an evil clone? Let us know in the comment section below.